One late autumn, four friends Artem, Liza, Kirill, and Yulia decided to spend the last warm days outdoors. They had been friends since childhood and always craved new adventures. Artem, a skeptic and a fan of the occult, loved gathering old legends. Liza, the bravest in the group, feared nothing, though she secretly dreaded darkness. Kirill was cautious, often relying on his intuition. And Yulia, quiet and reserved, rarely voiced her thoughts, but always followed the group. This time, they were drawn to a mysterious place, Shadow Lake. Legends about it had been passed down from generation to generation. Locals said that the lake devours those who gaze into its waters for too long. Even on the sunniest days, the lake was covered in a grey mist, and its waters appeared black, like an abyss. Locals warned that the lake was connected to an ancient curse. In the 18th century, a church stood there, only to be flooded during a violent storm. People said that the spirits of those who perished still roamed the lake's shores. The friends arrived at the lake in the evening to test if it was truly as ominous as people said. Naturally, they thought of it as a thrill, especially Artem, who scoffed at every story he heard. He was fascinated by the idea of finding remnants of the old church at the bottom and photographing them. Lisa, who didn't like tension, kept trying to lighten the mood, daring the guys to explore the lake. Yulia started glancing around nervously, as if someone was watching them. She thought she saw ghostly faces in the fog, but didn't dare mention it to her friends. Taking a few steps closer to the water, they heard a faint whisper. At first, they thought it was the wind, but the whisper grew louder. Kirill noticed that their reflections in the water behaved strangely, as if they were moving out of sync with their own actions. It seemed to him that they were speaking, though their mouths weren't moving. Curious, Artem decided to investigate further. He dipped his hand into the water, only to feel something firmly grip his wrist. He flinched, but couldn't pull his hand away, as the force holding him seemed to grow stronger. He felt the water, initially cold, turning into some sticky liquid, like blood. Panicked, Kirill pulled Artem out. But from that moment, the friends sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The lake seemed alive. Every now and then, they heard strange voices and saw shadows in the fog, which quickly disappeared when they tried to look at them. Yulia once again noticed faces that looked familiar and yet entirely foreign. Finally, they saw the remains of the church walls beneath the water. Liza suggested they step back from the water, but Artem insisted on going closer. He wanted to descend the shore and photograph the church ruins up close. Just as he took a few steps towards the bank, he noticed some entity rising from the depths. Its face was twisted, its hollow eyes staring directly at him. When Artem looked into those eyes, he seemed to see another world, a world of darkness and suffering, where every soul was in eternal torment. Shadows began wrapping around his arms, holding him in place. He felt as though something was draining him from within, tearing him apart while he stood frozen. Liza and Yulia panicked and rushed to him, trying to pull him out of the ghostly circle. But something dark and dense held them back. They began to lose hope, feeling pressure on their chests as they heard soft, endless whispers around them, as if from another world. Suddenly, they all felt as if the lake had released them, and they found themselves back on the shore, hearts pounding with fear. But Artem was different. He had become silent, his eyes hollow, as if something inside him had died. Lysa and Kirill weren't themselves either. Lysa couldn't shake the feeling that the lake was watching her constantly, while Kirill stopped sleeping at night, haunted by shadows in his dreams. The villagers found them in the forest a few hours after they failed to return to town. Yulia, who had never spoken of what she saw, uttered only one thing. It's watching us from everywhere. And now, as autumn comes, legends about Shadow Lake are retold once more in the village. The townsfolk say that the souls of those who glimpsed its secrets remain there forever.